Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon to all of you. Thank you very much for joining us. It gives me great pleasure and honor to welcome you to our Heritage Dialogue run, by the UNESCO Chair for World Heritage and Sustainable Tourism Management in the Arab region at GUTech. Our dialogue today is going to address a very important topic. It's about urban architecture, the built environment, and the livability challenges. But I will not actually bore you to death. My name is Ahmed Al Mukhaini. I will be your moderator for this session. And it gives me great pleasure and honor to introduce our speakers for the day. But before I do that, I would like maybe to share two admin notices. First notice would be about questions. So if you have questions, please post them in the chat. And then we will maybe take some questions as we go through the midway of the webinar, of the dialogue, and then, or we can have them towards the end. So just feel free to post your questions throughout discussion. The second thing is, I think maybe Risa has been in touch with you. Those who would be interested in a certificate of attendance, please let us know either by corresponding with the chair or by writing your name here, and then we will, Risa will get in touch with you to organize the certificate. And without any further delay, I would like to introduce my first speaker for today, Professor Soumyen Bandyopadhyay. He is Sir James Sterling Chair in Architecture, and he served as the head of the Liverpool School of Architecture at the University, of course, of Liverpool between 2016 and 2021. And he is currently the Associate Dean for Research at the School of Arts. He co-founded the Center for the Study of Architecture and Cultural Heritage of India, Arabia, and the Maghreb, and he comes with extensive experience in urban design, conservation, and Middle Eastern architectural history. He will be interlocked by Professor Hiba Aziz, and Professor Hiba is a professor at the Faculty of Business and Economics. I'm just trying to do two things at the same time. At the German University of Technology in Oman, specializing in heritage, tourism, and sustainable development. She is also the holder of the UNESCO Chair in World Heritage Management and Sustainable Tourism in the Arab region. And she is the director of the Research Center on the Indian Ocean, which is a center that is focused on economics, heritage, and sustainability in the Indian Ocean Rim at GUTech, at the same university. It's important for us, before we embark on the discussion and before I ask Professor Hiba to give context to the discussion today, that we introduce the chair. Just for those who are not aware of the chair, the UNESCO Chair in World Heritage Management and Sustainable Tourism in the Arab region aims to support the implementation of the World Heritage Convention in the Arab region in alignment with the Sustainable Development Goal, but with a particular focus on cultural tourism, as well as capacity building for professionals and researchers in the tourism and heritage areas, and also providing advisory support to assist states in implementing mechanisms of the World Heritage Convention. So without any further delay, it gives me great pleasure to pass the floor to Professor Hiba to provide the conceptual context to the discussion, framing the central debate, and engage directly with Professor Soumyen. Professor Hiba, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ahmed, for the introduction and for your continued support um, and all the chair activities. Sorry. Ahmed is, of course, a senior research fellow at the UNESCO chair here at Geotech in the Sultanate of Oman. And thank you, all participants, for being part of this discussion. The Heritage Dialogue is a quarterly dialogue that we host here at the chair, addressing different topics. And you're very welcome to share with us ideas for further dialogues that we can host in the future. I would like to maybe, as Ahmed said, maybe present the context and then leave the floor to the experts to discuss. For a very long time, the concept of authenticity has been a contested concept and has been a concept that has really bothered me personally despite my very, very long career and my white hair in discussing the concepts of authenticity from a tourism perspective, as an attraction for tourists to visit authentic places, from World Heritage perspective. However, I do still find the concept very contested. The rationale for doing this and the context, as Ahmed advised me to address, was how we can combine the concept of authenticity with the concept of livability when we come, especially addressing private heritage. Recently, we've been working in the Sultanate of Oman in the oasis, for the Bahla Oasis and Bahla Fort, listed on the World Heritage List in 1987 as the very first World Heritage site in the Gulf Cooperation Council area. Dealing with the fort, as complicated as it is, has been more or less straightforward. It is a fort. It is expected to be renovated using as much as possible the traditional architecture method, Adobe architecture, earthen architecture that has been prevailing at the time. The problem came when the boundaries of the World Heritage Site, which is sort of represented by the wall to the oasis, have within its enclosure almost 19 neighborhoods, 19 hara, as we say, or settlements. These 19 settlements currently are totally, of course, most of them owned privately by the people who used to live in these areas. However, people have abandoned the oasis in search of more comfortable accommodation facilities to nearby areas. The abandoned Adobe architecture houses remain within the boundaries of the World Heritage Site, yet they are not renovated, most of them. And they are, and this is really what, while we're working on the management plan for the Bahla Oasis, this is what has kind of alerted us to this problem, or to this kind of contested area, the area of authenticity and livability. So if I go and ask the community to build their houses, the houses that they own, using traditional architecture, using Adobe architecture, am I encouraging an authentic status? Or is that kind of a bit of a staged authenticity, as Dean McKennell has mentioned, to present the place as it used to be, yet it's not reflective of what the community wants in this time frame. The community, most of them are not interested to live in an Adobe architecture, Adobe refurbished house. The issues of comfort, continuity of occupation, functionality, usability prevails over the issue of conserving traditional Adobe architecture. Many efforts has been taken, various discussions from the one side. The government has got, according to the heritage law, an instruction that houses that are private heritage that is older than, or heritage that is older than 100 years is not supposed to be demolished. However, at the same time, owners of such houses are faced with a lot of issues. The first thing is the lack of motivation for them to refurbish a house to live in using Adobe architecture. Some of them have tried to refurbish the house using Adobe architecture to turn it into a tourism attraction. Happened in in Harat al-Okra, in Nizwa, for example. That has led to yet another unauthentic existence of the old Hara that has become dominated by features of hotels, coffee shops, but not really of houses, that is significant for an area or for an oasis that is also characterized by agriculture, by managing water systems, and by agricultural produce. This kind of dilemma that we've been at together with my colleagues here at the chair, and I'm sure it has pre-existed our discussion, is what I really would like to present to my colleague, Professor Showman, and to really ask him, what can we do? What is authenticity? And what is and is asking the community to rebuild houses using Adobe architecture, even though this is not convenient for them to live, and even though this house that will be converted from being a residential place to become a tourist attraction suitable for a tourist gaze, is authentic. Is it authentic to turn the Hara into a tourist attraction? Is that kind of authenticity more important than the livability of Al-Hara, meaning allowing the Hara or the settlement to continue existing as an agricultural community? So I think that's the context. And I would like to really invite Professor Showman to maybe address this from his wide experience and from actually his engagement with a lot of the Harat here in Oman, or a lot of the settlements here in Oman. And I'm sure he can shed some light on this dilemma. And then I will go back to him with some further questions after his intervention. So Showman, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Hiba, Professor Hiba, and thank you, my very good friend Ahmed, for introducing. It is obviously something that has no one single answer, but I'll try to address that with some visual material so that I can kind of briefly talk about what I think is needed. And within that context, we can talk about the issues around livability and authenticity in more detail as we go towards that. I'm going to share my screen just 1 second. I hope the screen is visible to everyone. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So I just suggested a working title of saying it's beyond that. We need to really go beyond nostalgia and in order to look for and address the challenges of livability. And as Professor Haber rightly pointed out, I think resolving the issue of use of historic sites through solely through tourism is a significant problem that needs to be really rethought, and that needs rethinking very urgently. Just looking at this is an image of Harat al-Okra in Nizwa in 1960. This was one of the older photographs of probably, if not the oldest ones available around that time, from Henry Rogers. And it shows the organization of the settlement as it used to exist. And one of the important things that I would like to suggest is that, look, this is ever incomplete. No living place is ever complete, is ever entirely catered for and addressed. So livability is integrally connected to a kind of a place being perpetually in the making, as it were. And that, I think, is quite important to really think about and keep in mind. The important thing would be to also think about, sorry, I should still go back, think about the issues around resilience. So I will place the issue of livability in the context of resilience rather than thinking about authenticity. If I could say that there is a resilience that we are looking for, and that resilience should be in the physical built environment terms. But again, as I will go forward and talk about that a little bit more, that it's not just the physical thing. It's about really at the core of it is how we live, how we are envisaging ourselves to live in within a world that is fast changing and is obviously interacted with many, many, many challenges, bigger challenges that we have ever experienced before. So the resilience in the public realm, in the public spaces, the resilience of the built form, resilience of the building types, the different building types, because it's not only one type of building which will support everything. There is a kind of whole set of relationship that emerges because of the different building types coming together. And that's down to the way that we use environments. Just also wanted to say that on the right-hand side, there is this image where you find that these dark brown patches are mosques, which have existed for a very, very long time. Now, the mosque over here, the Masjid al-Shwatna, is one of the ancient mosques of Oman. There is Masjid al-Fard, which is also an 11th century, as I understand, mosque. This one, the Masjid al-Sheikh, is probably 10th century was, but has been completely destroyed in more recent times. Then there are others. So these elements, these mosques and many other civic buildings had become sort of really resilient fragments, I would say, resilient artifacts within an urban environment that we needed to understand, before we made any changes to Hartalakar in Nizwa. Now, on to the next one. So, in order to understand the public realm, the build form, and the building types, I think what is important, and we haven't been doing that very much at all, because we are so embroiled in our understanding of the past as a nostalgic expression, that we have not understood building types. We have not understood the different types of spaces that existed and how they performed. So this word, I would say, performance, is not just about a technical performance in the scientific sense, but it's more to do with how do we use, how does it engage with the environment, both built environment and the natural environment, and how that performance actually really choreographs our use of space. And that, I think, is quite important for us to keep in mind. And what that means also is that it will need quite a lot of extensive research, which is where I think the UNESCO chair's position comes into being, quite effectively. A lot of us, who are working with built environments would be really helpful. And that means that, built environments have to be studied very, very carefully, quite extensively, not only just physically, but in terms of their ethnographic dimension or anthropological dimension, probably more appropriately, because these are, if it is right to say that these should be continuing to work within the present environment. And hence, I think understanding environments, understanding built forms very carefully is really important. Now, just looking at one example where I will sort of go back out of Oman into Spain, and this was a project that we did 2-3 years back, which was really to do with understanding a small little village in central Spain, understanding the organizing principles. Here, what I was indicating on the right-hand side is a whole series of rules through which the built environment performed over a period of time and over a long period of time. And those are to do with relationships between buildings, within the building, but also with neighboring elements and so on. And that, I think, is really important for Oman to understand as well. And so when you're looking into those organizing principles, you're into the new environment, you're also looking at how do I modify? Because environments are not static. And this is where I have my issues with mainstream conservation, because conservation is not necessarily, unless it's seen in a wider spectrum of possible interventions, sorry, we will probably not be able to understand and to continue to live within environments like this. So the important issue again here is modification. So I've been speaking about resilience, I'm speaking about performance, and I've looked at organizing principles, but also modification of those principles. And therefore, the modification of principles would continue to work with maintaining that resilience, so maintaining those rules. And that is really important for us to understand that. And this is also something that has happened in more recent terms because of poverty of our knowledge and understanding of architecture and urban and issues, that something that is visibly attractive becomes suddenly more creative in certain people's definition, but that is not necessarily the case, because ancient principles are also, when modified, can create really exciting opportunities. So we can talk about those things in more detail. But then applying those principles down to the level of buildings, down to the level of urban space, down to the way that people will now try to use, both in terms of, and the whole point here was not to focus on tourism only. And in fact, tourism only would be a really, really problematic approach, as Professor Heba has just rightly pointed out, that it would be a lived-in environment. That means that we are not only just residing in residence, but also actively engaged in working. And that, I think, is quite important. So my approach, and I've just highlighted here, and I can come back to it. One of the problems with many countries, including Oman, is that we do not have a livability performance indicator. We have national guides, but these are all about material guides, about technical guides of how the brick should perform, or how the concrete should perform, and so on and so forth, but not really looking into how the livability performance would be in some way given a quality, a character, and a standard and a mark. So very importantly, I think it's we need to, as I've been alluding to before, is we need to understand how do we live, how are we going to live in the future, and how are we going to work now and in the future. And that then puts into place the rest of the things about context. It's a changing context, or certain elements of the context are unchanged. So how do we engage with those things? How do we engage with existing character? And existing character does not mean just buildings and their appearance in their facades, which is one of the things problematically that has happened in Oman quite a lot, but more to do with the spatial character of the space characters of those urban spaces, streets, relationship, how big, how small, because not every space needs to be big. Depending on what kind of work we're doing, what kind of engagement we have, those should change in scale and character and so on. Build form again is important, and we can talk about those things again in detail. Houses, but also public spaces, very important. Place making is very important, and patterns of movement within that place, as I've been saying just before. Let's not forget that nature has a strong and continuing relationship, and the resources and lifespan of buildings are also quite important as well, and we will talk about that. Just coming to the end of this, I think one of the other things that we have not done is that we have not really given the population good examples of how these ancient materials could work. We tend to forget that concrete is a very, very ancient material. It was used way, way back in the past, even before the historic periods that we know of. So, but this is an Austrian architect. Probably many of you would know the name, Martin Roach. These are built in rammed earth. All constructions, and these are not concrete, these are rammed earth. But also you can see how rammed earth is then put in the context of concrete and other modern materials. So the modifications that I was talking about is quite important and is quite relevant even in the way that we begin to look at materials, look at use, and so on. The new use, the changed use, and these are domestic contexts that they are quite important to think about. Another very important architect today is Francis Kéré. He has been working quite extensively in Africa. Again, think about it, that these buildings are earth buildings. This one is a laterite building. Laterite is a slightly stronger sort of earth situation, but these have been made into blocks and these are used therefore. But also if you think about the very gentle modifications that are done, the performances of those buildings through the coming in of light, the air, and so on and so forth. So Francis Kéré is really, really important in that context that, and we need to think about how these um, good examples, these good practice examples are really embedded in the work that we show and discuss in order to come to it. In Oman, we have done a few things, and I'll end with that. These are sort of modifications of existing structures or insertions of new ones where very small modifications can make, in our view, very important changes. And these are in Misratul Abriyin, where we have worked. We've also proposed and made changes in domestic player situations in Salalah. This was one example where we were hoping that the building will generate its own funds, not only just through tourism, but also in terms of building capacity and so on, which can then be contributing back to the livability of the building and so on. Then again, I think, as I have been saying before, in all of these cases, the public space is crucial. The civic space is really important to think about. I will end there. So what I really talked about is, and I'll stop sharing here. Has it stopped sharing? Yeah, I think so. So the key things that I wanted to talk about in terms of livability is that instead of authenticity, if we can think about the resilience of urban environments like these and what were the characteristics of authenticity, the notions of modification, how we live, and not only just in terms of the domestic, but also in terms of the activities, actions, and how the wide range of those activities can really be brought into it. And then thinking about the right kind of examples that will give us those ways forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Soumyen. Very enlightening, and it's very interesting that you also took us to different areas. Although, as has been previously mentioned, the UNESCO chair is situated in the Sultanate of Oman. We do have Oman around us, but we are a chair that is dedicated to work with the entire Arab region. And Soumyen has been very generous in also taking us into other territories like Spain, etc. Soumyen, if you allow me to ask you a question. So the choices, I mean, I think we all agree that the idea of livability, I don't know, if we are going to put authenticity and livability in an order, I mean, do you think they as concepts are contradictory concepts? As I think I would like to go back to this very simple question that we have, that I have started in my introduction. Community in Harat al-Aql in Bahla are resistant to the fact to continue building the houses that they own within the oasis using earthen architecture. In their opinion, earthen architecture is not sturdy enough. It requires constant modification and maintenance, which I think what we all agree that has happened in the past. Even Bahla Fort itself has had many shapes because of the earthen architecture maintenance that, every year that people would maintain it maybe in a different way, so not necessarily it is fixed. So what can we advise the people? What can we tell the community who is resisting the fact? And also because at the moment, and due to limited research and innovation in the field of earthen architecture, it is still quite expensive to compared with building with normal, bricks and mortar. So if I go as an anthropologist, talk to the community, trying to convince them that this is the policy, this is what you should do, what would you say? How would you address this issue?
Okay, thanks. So one thing about authenticity in my mind, and as I said that I do not necessarily place myself in the kind of conservation quarter, purely conservation quarter. But I do place myself in the conservation quarter if I look into the full spectrum of conservation opportunities that these places offer. So in that sense, for me, authenticity is not about what it was before. But authentic has to be in relation to what? Authentic has to be in relation to how people live, not how people lived in the past. And then the question is also that which past are we talking about? These are the usual questions we always pose, because clearly, even within slow-moving traditional environments, within a 500-year period, there were major changes that took place to construction methods and to approaches and so on. So people were not standing still. So are we talking about authenticity from the 9th century, or are we talking about authenticity from the 15th or 16th century? So these would be different. So I think that we have made that mistake kind of going down the narrow conservation approach, that where the technology, and it's also that it's about a particular kind of technology that has been really the focus of it, rather than the performance of buildings. And because of that, I think we have really relied very heavily on a particular kind of wrong understanding of authenticity. And if we can, but at the same time, that many of these environments have moved slowly, as I mentioned. That is what I mean by that, is that there are things that have stayed there for a longer period of time, and innovation, which I think is, of course, sometimes contradictory to the sort of general understanding of the Middle East and the world around that. Innovation has always taken place, but innovation had a very careful way of modifying things within an environment in all spectrums, not only just in the built environment. Innovation has always happened. So I think that if we're thinking about authenticity, I would say that we have to understand that how innovation took place, what were the kind of premises of innovation, and that we are not hung up with one particular period of construction methods, because there is this tendency of a kind of thinking about the built environment as just a scientific thing, and not just as you would very well know, as an anthropological, artifact. So I think that, once we begin to come out of that, about understanding innovation, about understanding that these environments are always changing and changeable, then we are in a better position to understand what we should be keeping and how innovation could be, to an extent, subservient to the dominant environment that is there. So innovation should not be such that it changes everything. However, do we not, if I was explaining those buildings, by Martin Roach and Francis Carey. If you look into Francis Carey's work, that the roofs have undergone significant transformation. Because if you look into built environments in mud, earth architecture, the one that suffers the most are the roofs. Now, that does not mean that the roof cannot be congruous with the rest of the building. It can be. It's a question of also what we tend to think that, oh, well, the roof will not go with the appearance of the rest of the appearance of the buildings and the built form. Now, that is an issue that has to be considered much more carefully and intellectually to understand how capping of buildings do perform. Okay. Now, roof is a capping of a building. It provides an umbrella under which things work. Now, if this is purely a protective issue, we can certainly do that. If this is also what happens with the roof is that the roof has versatile opportunities in terms of providing longer spans. Now, if I were to today, we have moved away from previous situations where weddings would be a small affair. The weddings are huge affairs today, and certainly those weddings would need large spaces. Now, if we were to be able to change the nature of the roof, we would be able to create environments which are comfortable, because one of the things which is well known now that earthen architecture provides a much more comfortable environment, both in terms of the heat gain, heat loss issue, but also maintaining humidity, possibly allowing a reduced air conditioning load, and so on. Certainly, these things can be done by approaching simply the modification of a roof structure and thinking about how the use of a building can be considered, how big or how small a use of a building can be considered. So coming back to that point about authenticity, I would say the issue is that we should not think about authenticity just in terms of a past. The authenticity is very much part of our present. We are not authentic if we are not about today. How we shape that today is certainly down to us. Certainly a material from, concrete, if we are using concrete from the past, surely we can use the earth from the past too. How we use it, what we use it with is another matter that we will talk about. And certainly, I think I would argue, therefore, for an appropriateness of the earthen material. Clearly, there's a lot of work happening around in terms of resilience. I mean, earth is an incredibly resilient material when it comes to load-bearing structures. It is incredibly strong. So it is possible to combine materials to create other kinds of opportunities.
Thank you, Soumyen. I have a lot of questions, comments, but I think Ahmed is saying that there is a question in the chat. So maybe we turn to our audience. And maybe Ahmed, would you like to engage us with the question from the chat?
Yes, the question is come from Mr. Hassan, and it says, when registering inhabited heritage site, World Heritage List, people and non-material culture is an essential component combined with the authenticity. How can we reconcile the two? Is the question clear?
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
I think 2 or 3 parts to it. One is that the World Heritage Site, as has been conceived, and the World Heritage Site status, there's quite a lot of critical literature that is available revisiting that understanding. Because one of the key problems with the way that certain quarters of the World Heritage group sort of push it, that is that it is unchangeable, that it is fixed, and that nothing can be done other than conserving it. Now, as I've said before, that I think the very simple question has been asked is that which past are we conserving? So clearly there are many, many pasts to be conserved, and that has to be kept as evidence. Now, the 2 components that you mentioned in your question, that is that, there is a non-material culture, that is the intangible cultural aspects, and then there are the people. Now, as I have been mentioning that both our material culture, but also our intangible heritage changes over time. Somebody who was working, just if you can imagine that the practice of coffee drinking, at one point it wasn't there. And then it was introduced into the Arabian world from Ethiopia through Yemen, of course. And that was in a way legitimized because of commercial reasons at a particular point in the 18th century. So if you can think about just the culture of coffee drinking in Oman and what it does and its relationship to the built fabric, for example, the sublers that we had and the majlis that we have today in our houses, all of those things would have been an innovation at certain point in time. So my point would be that I think we have to make sure that these things we recognize that both the physical, the material culture, the intangible heritage, and the people, they're all changing entities. And unless we can understand what legacies they have left behind, and this is why heritage is an incredibly complicated aspect, that how do we leave and how do we celebrate the traces of certain past, at the same time recognize the presence and the futures. That is really where the heritage, the difficulty of heritage lies. And this is why it's not a straightforward scientific process. And in order to do that, we might have to question the UNESCO status sometimes. We might have to understand that the UNESCO status has to be, as has been more widely understood, and the changing understanding of that has to be better enshrined in Oman before we can actually do anything with these environments. But also, can I also add one thing, that a lot of the problem has happened because, and in terms of the more expensive nature of material, why a material becomes expensive is also because of its artificial market availability or not, right? So the concrete is readily available and is being made readily available by crushing our mountains and hills and so on and so forth on a regular basis. Now, but that is because that is enshrined within the building regulations, and because the building performance is connected directly to a column structure, you could not build today even a load-bearing structure, which is unthinkable in the rest of the world. In Oman, you can't build anything without having concrete columns. Now that is an artificial construct within which we have made the earth material much more expensive because the expertise does not become easily accessible, within that environment. So changing building regulations, changing building performance regulations, even the new performance regulations for material are really not geared towards a use of other materials.
Thank you, Sean, but maybe I missed to mention that the question was from Mr. Hassan Al-Faylakawi, I think from Faylaka in
Okay.
Kuwait. Okay.
Okay.
I have another question here from Miss Nuha, and the question says, the context of sensitive UNESCO heritage sites that have restricted access, such as the citadel in Erbil, Iraq, what methods or strategies allow the space to transition to open public access without destroying the integrity of the site?
I am very conversant with Erbil, having sort of also directed a couple of PhD projects there. Thanks for that question. And I think, again, the range of things that that one has to consider that while we think about the World Heritage Site, is that are we talking about people that people should be living there, people should be working there, and if that is the case, then yeah, so then we have to really think about what kind of, without losing the integrity of the site, what kind of activities and what kind of livability would be possible. So there may be certain restrictions to the livability and the workability, but I can see that many historic sites do not need to have necessarily vehicular access in the way that we think about it today. If you consider the very narrow lanes in Hong Kong, they have modified their fire, brigade machines, the fire engines, to be a much smaller engine to go into the very narrow lanes that Hong Kong has. So it is possible to modify, it is possible to adapt to the situation that we are in, because we tend to adapt the other way around. That is that, we adapt our built environment to the cars that we are buying. But if we were to do that the other way around, then it will be possible to invest in new enterprise, which will then allow transportation in a different way. It will also allow possibly in today's world of digital environments and so on, it is clearly possible that a significant range of activities can take place from within the historic environments, like this the Erbil Citadel. It is also possible that a range of other activities associated with our everyday living can take place. Admittedly, if you're talking about bigger, without losing the integrity, again, we can look into more details about that. But admittedly, there are other activities which cannot be fitted into a particular environment like that, can or could be relocated or allocated spaces around the historic citadel, as has been the case, sometimes more successfully. And in the case of Erbil, there are many issues in the kind of environment that has extended around that. So it is possible certainly to do that. The strategies that would be employed would be really about assessing the working environments. What kind of proportion of this will be lived environment? What kind of proportion would be given out to aspects like tourism? What are the ranges of activities that will take place? What kind of in economic activities would be there? So all of those things can be drawn in to consider a livable environment like Erbil.
Maybe I just have a quick intervention, really to follow on Showman's discussion of the UNESCO World Heritage Site, and also of our colleague Noha from Erbil. I think, really this kind of almost sacred status that the World Heritage Convention has acquired, the 1972 convention, it's about time to sort of question it a bit. And I can never stop being mesmerized by the fact that within the strategic objectives of the convention, the first mention of the community appeared in 2006 from 1972. It's only in 2006 that the convention has recognized, through its set of strategic objectives known as the 5 Cs, looking at capacity conservation, capacity building, communication, and community. I'm missing one. But however, community has come only in 2006. And I just feel that, for an organization and for a convention, to which I think it is the widest ratified convention within UNESCO, to be operating along these lines, and is something that we really need to address it. And one cannot blame the countries, the state parties that have signed to the convention, to try and make their policies reflective of what they believe the convention is addressing, which is prioritizing conservation over any other element, and prioritizing what they believe of authenticity over other concepts that we are addressing here today, like the concept of livability. So I feel that this is something that really is worth reflecting, maybe worth us as heritage practitioners to to find a way of addressing this. I think they might have repossessed my UNESCO chair, my UNESCO's chair status. But I think this is something that needs to be mentioned and to be highlighted. Yeah,
absolutely.
So,
No, I was just going to add, Hubert, that the historic urban landscape approach, which was adopted in 2011 and really consolidated in 2016 under the UNESCO's, does acknowledge the importance of change. And
yeah,
it very specifically indicates that change is there to take place. And so the whole objective is to manage change. And this is where our issues around livability and modification comes in, because modification is nothing other than managing change, within a set of rules. I think the historic urban landscape has been a really important contribution
game
in more
changer.
recent
Yes,
times. At the same time, one has to understand, why did Paris or London never apply for a World Heritage status? It has got plenty to do so, but it didn't, because it wanted to ensure that change in a sensible way could continue to take place. So that was one of the things that I would like to bring in. I think Lynn Meskel did write a really very important book. On The Future in Ruins is the title of the book. And it's a very important critique of the UNESCO's World Heritage Site approaches and the politics around that. And she's continued to write and talk about it in different contexts. It's worth reading that, because that does actually question the way that it was approached, say, for example, in Egypt, for example, in many of their countries. And those are really important lessons to learn.
I think maybe from where you are sitting, Shoman, you can give us a living example of the old mercantile city of Liverpool, which has it's a case in a point, as they say, of managing change. I think that was slightly extreme in that case. Managing
Well,
change,
yeah.
and within the
Uh,
setting of an old of a World Heritage Site. For those of you who don't know, the city of Liverpool have lost its World Heritage status in 2021, if I'm not mistaken, on the basis of the establishment of the stadium of the Liverpool Stadium within the premises of the old mercantile port. So I think that was always quoted as an example.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is in my view, it's both parties to blame. That is the city as well as the UNESCO. Part of that is UNESCO's intransigence, and part of that is about not finding the right solution that could have actually gone on that site, or this whole string of sites along the river, which is very important simply because of the huge amount of trade that went through Liverpool port and docks, right through the world, right across the world, including very important slave trade legacy and so on and so forth. So heritage is not just a positive thing, it's also a negative thing that has to be acknowledged, in our understanding. But however, I think that, I'm not necessarily lacking in optimism in this regard, because if Liverpool can look at, instead of looking at just the strip along the river as a World Heritage Site, if it looked at the whole city as a World Heritage Site, which it can claim, because it's also the beginning point of the steam engine. The rocket actually started off from Liverpool and went towards Manchester. So if you think about that, the entirety of the cultural aspects, positive and negative, I think Liverpool, and if you think about the city rather than a strip, it could come back to a World Heritage Site status. And that's something worth considering when we think about various sites, including those in Oman.
Interesting. I have a few more questions. I go back to Ahmed, our moderator, to check if there's any questions in the chat that need to be addressed, but maybe I can.
Doctora?
Sorry?
There is one question that came through. Would you like me to ask it now or shall I leave it later?
We can address it, yes, no problem.
Well, the question is here from Mr. Hakam about, in the context of post-disaster reconstruction, how would you address authenticity? The post-disaster reconstruction.
Salam Hassan. How are you? I hope you're well. I think that is certainly one of the most difficult questions that I think we will have to address now in especially in the Arab world, and I think it is I would say that going back to my earlier suggestion, that I think for me the urban fabric, the urban organization, the urban order is much more important than just the buildings. And I think therefore for me, the issue of authenticity would lie in the authentic urban fabric and the possible restitution of the authentic urban fabric rather than the buildings themselves. So if we are able to go back to an extent to what we have lost in terms of the urban fabric, and restitute those as much as is possible, keeping in mind again that certainly the new demands, the kind of catastrophic change that has taken place as a result of these major destructions will have its effect in terms of the direction people would like to move. I would say that it's quite important to bring back the urban fabric rather than the buildings themselves, and that would be my first sort of beginning. But I'm very happy to talk to some on this.
Sam, yeah, good to see you as well.
Good to see you.
Yes.
Doctor,
So, yeah.
go ahead, please.
Ahmed?
Proceed. Go ahead, sir. Go ahead, ma'am.
I just want to take this idea of reconstruction, which maybe Soumyen also have framed it within the concept of modification, really to, a practical, practical solution, and, for those of us, I'm sure Soumyen has been in that place as well, in a position to providing government advice and to discussion. So let's go back to concepts like, okay, would you encourage, for example, as has happened, and I think I've seen on the chat a question about Harat al-Aqra in Nizwa, would you consider, which I think, Soumyen, you are familiar with it, and you have posted an old photo of Harat al-Aqra prior to the renovation that happened recently. I mean, how do we address that? As we know, in Harat al-Aqra, there has been a lot of intervention using concrete, using traditional brick and mortar, covered with sarouj, which sarouj is a plastering material that is traditional plastering material that is traditionally used here in Oman, giving the overall hara or the overall settlement a touch and feel of what it used to be, and maybe a touch and feel of, if you want, an urban fabric. Yet the way in which the material with which this houses has been reconstructed, maybe that takes us back to the question that was posed by Hossein. If we think of post-disaster or climate change or just deterioration over time, has been constructed using different material. I know this is quite a contested issue. The whole, especially Nizwa. Maybe it will be good to address that topic, Soumyen. What do you think? You have the example, and for those of you who don't know, the Harat al-Aqra in Nizwa is again a settlement that has been surrounding the fort, as in many cases in the Sultanate of Oman. This settlement was built using Adobe architecture. The community has done an amazing and an innovative approach of establishing a local co-op in which all the house owners pooled together and renovated these houses. And given that it is not a World Heritage Site and it is in private hands, the community have a bit of a leeway in how they can renovate and restore these buildings. And the world in Oman has split between pros and cons. Those who think that this has really ruined the authenticity of the settlement, and those who really believed in the livability that this approach and this practical approach has brought back into the area. Where do you stand, Soumyen, of this?
That's interesting. Thank you. There are, as I said, that I think I stand for modification. I stand for understanding the many paths which have will be leaving traces, on an environment. So if we look at Harat al-Aqra, first thing is that we have destroyed 18th century, 17th century wall, which was built during the Yarabia period largely, and you can see the differences in the different parts of the wall, or you could see the differences. Now that's been completely destroyed. Now, I would say that did we have another one that had such an extensive sort of defensive wall? No. Did we have the towers in a particular way that performed a particularly specific warfare at that point in time? No. Did we have a relationship because the wall was pulling in as the city changed, as the society changed, pulling in some of the Waqf land, to protect that Waqf land against other kind of normal development? Do we have an example? No. The city changed quite a lot, and those traces were there in that built environment. Those are, as we call, morphological changes and traces of morphological changes. So, for example, through that settlement, there was a fallage that went through simply because, and I showed you that one slide with the old photograph, but on the right, there was a morphological conjecture of the original settlement and how it evolved. Now, there are many, many traces of those things which are still there. Some just about, others have disappeared. Now, did we keep those? Did we understand before we changed those? No, we didn't. So I think that there were those many changes that took place that had left traces within the settlement. And these are quite important ones, whether it's about the change from the 9th, 10th century Ibadi Imamate to a sort of period when the Nabahinas came in or the Yaribas came in and so on and so forth. We have lost those traces. Okay. Now, I think that if those traces were maintained while making those changes, I would have understood that. The other thing is also that how do we work with existing building types and make those work as much as is possible, first and foremost, to accommodate new functions and then make the changes. That has not happened. So, for example, that the swimming pools that have been created within an agricultural land, which used to be a kind of really beautiful stretch of green, as you had seen in that photograph, that was done not understanding the morphological character of that place. So there are many, many issues that I would say are problematic there, partly not because of the local population, because partly, as I said before, that there aren't any good examples, there aren't any good practice examples in front of them. And the bottom-up or the top-down approach undertaken, unilaterally is a problem. Yeah. So the other example of the top-down unilaterally would be Harta Bila in Mana, which was top-down approach, clearing it up, and then we will do it. That isn't either the right approach. And this one is a bottom-up approach. But if you look into those four key things that the historic urban landscape approach suggests, that we look first and foremost into stakeholders and communities, we look into the knowledge base, we look into the financing systems, and we look into the regulatory mechanisms. Now, out of those, there is a stakeholder engagement that is abundantly clear. The other three are not there. And hence we suffer what we have suffered there in terms of it. Of course, it attracts a huge, and this is a dilemma, that it attracts a huge number of people, especially during holidays and so on, all with their selfie, taking selfies and so on. It's a question of what kind of experiences we are ready to offer, the range, and what do we actually do to modify that range as well. So I'll stop there because I think, yes, this is very close to my heart, in the way that Hartalakar has suffered.
Yes. Thank you, Soumyen. And also not to be on the pessimistic side and reiterating what Soumyen has mentioned. This abandoned settlement has come to life. It has a lot of economic opportunities that has been created.
Absolutely.
And a lot of visitors that are now outnumbering people who used to only go to the fort and just walk out of Nizwa. But I think the point here is, what are we communicating? And whether, if we have decided to have a heritage inn without a swimming pool, but with an agricultural land, or with a palm date museum telling people how agriculture used to take place, or about an illustration of a fallow system, would we have had less people? And do people, I think, here I can put on my hat as knowing a little bit about the tourism and consumer behavior, and whether people would drive all the way to Nizwa to chill in a swimming pool. And here I think is again going back to policies and to regulatory framework that should not just look on the idea of, okay, is this building built with with mud brick? Is it using sarouj? But also what is being demonstrated within it, and what here another issue. What kind of interpretation are we offering? It's not just going around an old city. It's not it's not a Disneyland, kind of recreated old village. It is actually a village. And I think, in addition to all what you've mentioned, I think the idea of the redesigning the entire village as a tourism attraction, so just like coffee shops and hotels, without having any kind of residential, or people being able to relive within the community. Maybe also that is not
Absolutely.
It's a debatable authentic.
Absolutely.
Debating the concept of authenticity.
Sure.
So yeah.
So yeah, I mean, the other thing that I would, obviously, and I don't need to remind people at all, but carrying capacity. Every settlement, every place can deal with so many people at any given time, and can deal with so many people, so many footfalls over a period of time. That I think is especially true for earthen architecture, because as soon as we have 2,000 people going through those streets, you can imagine that these are actually like kind of banging the floor, over many, many, many thousand times. And that, I think, creates enormous destruction to the problems to the built environment. So I think we have to keep in mind, but a smaller number of people surely could have actually had the similar kind of experience of going on the wall if that had been done in a different way.
I'm sorry, I feel as if we have Oman has dominated the discussion, and I think given that we a number of us are very much hands-on on the situation of heritage in Oman. Well, at least we now did a little bit of tourism promotion and invited attendees to come and visit Oman and see the different examples of Nizwa and Bahla and Misfat al-Abriyin as really a range of examples in which authenticity and livability have been kind of talking to each other, let's say.
Professor, if I may maybe combine two questions and maybe provide this as an opportunity for both of you, maybe to say some concluding remarks based on that. I have two questions, and then in response to your invitation, I'll try to make them Arab region-wide rather than very specific to Oman. The question is, one question is about when an old house or the layout of old houses become an impediment against someone who would like to work to live there. So it is not a conservation or rebuilding for the purpose of tourism, it's for the purpose of people reliving. So the reasons why the layout of old houses can actually not support or suit everyday modern life. The question here is, what would be one simple practical example or intervention in the lines of building performance indicators or regulations, as mentioned by Professor Shulman, would you recommend? So the question is about Oman, but maybe you can expand the answer to other countries in the region. And we have another question, which is kind of linked to it, but from a different perspective, by Dr. Huda bin Yunus, where she asked about what does authenticity mean for a place when the original community is no longer present, and then a new community is occupying it. How would we maintain that authenticity without the inherited knowledge of traditional practice? Do you see the two different perspectives, to reliving an old place? Is the question clear for both of you, Professor Hiba and Professor Shulman?
Or can I just ask, in terms of a new community living there, would that be a sort of tourism-based community? Are we talking about
Well, can
what
I
kind
read?
of, yeah.
I would read out the question as it appeared. If it is not clear, maybe you can ask Dr. Huda to come in. The question says, what does authenticity mean for a place when its original community is no longer present? And how can it be maintained when a new community occupies it without inherited knowledge of traditional practice? If your question still holds, maybe we'll ask Dr. Huda to come in. Would you like me to ask her to come in?
Yeah, she can.
Dr. Huda, are you still online?
Hello.
أهلا دكتورة تفضلي.
Am I audible because my internet connection is not very good? Actually, my question is related to the place to which I belong. It's the island of Jerba in Tunisia, and yeah. So we have some old houses where the original people or original community has left. They migrated to Tunis, to the capital, and they sold their traditional houses to new migrants from the south of Tunisia, but they have different culture, different traditional practices, and these people tend to bring their, like for example, in the southern of Tunisia, they build with rocks that are yellow, like yellowish rocks, and in Jerba it's a total different new materials, building materials. So these people are bringing their construction knowledge and materials, and they bring it to Jerba, which is like, I mean, it's out of the context and I don't know. They are the new occupiers of the island, literally. So this is the question. If I'm, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks a lot for clarifying. Thank you. Heather, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, I can. I think what has been reiterated by, first of all, I take Dr. Huda's comment. Thank you very much for joining us all the way from Jerba. I think here it goes back to regulatory frameworks, I think, because at least the community has to be incentivized. This is where we are really missing a lot in our Arab region as we go along. There should be incentives to encourage people to continue to inhabit the place. However, of course, it's always challenges because people wanted to have bigger houses, people wanted to be more accessible to the urban centers, to have jobs. So I really think that there is an element that is inevitable because people still have the freedom of mobility. But those who come in and who decide to come in should have an existing regulatory framework that is not imposing fake authenticity, but at least in terms of material or in terms of making it possible for people to retain the identity of the place feasible. But if people are rebuilding and reconstructing in void, then such circumstances will happen. I think I don't know if that is really what I think. I think I'll take it to the issue of maybe it's a subject of another dialogue. The whole issue of regulatory framework, incentives, green finance for people to continue, retaining certain elements that still is, make it livable. Showman, what do you think? New people moving in with new building styles.
Absolutely, and I think it's as you rightly point out that I think the regulatory mechanisms will be really important. The other thing that I always go back to is good practice examples, because just the rules don't often help, and if we cannot show how this could be done, it will not be happening. So it's important that we have some kind of good practice guides as well. At the same time, I think it's important that the other main stakeholder, the governmental stakeholder, has got another role to play as well, which is about safeguarding in this kind of situation, safeguarding morphological conditions, safeguarding conditions that are beyond the control of sometimes the individual dwellers who have now moved in. And how do we actually make those connections between the individual domain and the external domain? So aside from regulatory mechanisms, I will say that there is the need for highlighting those morphological and safeguarding those morphological conditions, which might not fall within regulatory mechanisms, and also giving good practice guides, examples and so on. I think that's really, really important to bring together.
Yeah, I think regulation is very important, and you cannot just walk into a place and decide to even using the most modern architecture or whatever. I mean, there should be, or there is for modern architecture, or for modern, how high you go, what material you use. I mean, this should be stipulated and regulated. I think there was the other question that was posed, Ahmad, about the using space for performance.
Yeah. Do you want to start, or shall I?
No, go ahead.
Okay. I think that's a really important question, and this is where I also feel that many of our educational institutions, whether it's architectural training, urban training, and so on, they have not been equipping their students enough to really do those, because I think many of these professions have become focused on big moves, big changes, big theatrical things, whereas the real creativity happens when you are able to modify small things, minor things, to make a big difference. And I feel that is really important in the case of especially old houses which are, at least what you suggest, is not no longer livable for contemporary living. However, one of the things that I would point out that some of the basic activities of working, eating, sleeping, using a table or a desk or floor and things to work and to engage with everyday things, that hasn't changed in many millennia. We still use our hands to even operate a computer, and that kind of relationship between the body and an object has not changed. So many of the spaces that are there could potentially still be largely usable and livable in that sense, because our bodily functions haven't changed that significantly. Admittedly, there are other things that have changed. For example, the amenities that we tend to use today, kitchens, toilets, so on and so forth, they have changed. Now, that is not too difficult to install and insert into physical environments. And also, if you'd like to have larger spaces, it is possible without losing the characteristics of the buildings themselves. Leaving, again, as I was saying before, leaving traces behind, it's possible to modify certain internal parts of buildings and so on, to bring in light, to create larger spaces, to create the perception of larger spaces. Whereas, sometimes, most of the time that we are working are with perceptions rather than the actualities. And that perception of large spaces, perception of other, modernities, as we conceive those, could be created within existing physical environments. And that is definitely possible. And the other thing that I've mentioned before is, and I really stick by that is careful modifications of structures, of amenities, depending on the requirements that are there, it would be really important.
Yes.
Thank you.
I totally agree. I think this is the concept of livability. Yes, that we need to make the space livable with innovation. It can happen. I don't know, maybe, Soumyen, does anything comes to you? I mean, I know you always say that there's an absence of good examples. I mean, is there really an absence of good examples?
No. There are plenty of good examples. I think the reason why I say there is an absence of good examples is because I think we have not kind of mobilized ourselves to collecting those better. So that's one thing. I was just thinking about just towards the end of last year, I was in Suzhou, just in the hinterland of Shanghai, one of the very ancient places, and it has got many of these traditional environments, the hutongs, where they have environments which were falling into disrepair, and now many people from different walks of life have gone in and modified those environments to create small living environments. So there are houses, very tiny houses, very tiny houses, but they are lived in by modern people, with modern facilities and modern aspirations, if you like. I've seen academics living there. I've seen designers, builders living there. I've seen various kinds of people living there, or restaurateurs living there in small environments that they have created. Now, they have created by modifying things, by creating courtyards, by creating openings to courtyards and so on, so that these small environments can become really beautifully livable. There are plenty of good examples in Italy, but also in many locations. So I don't need to do that. But we have to assemble those. We have to actually talk about the different things that are valuable in them. Not everything is applicable, but it's a question of learning the lessons. And I think that certainly we are not. I think our basic living style has not changed. I think we can talk about the car, that's a different matter, and there are plenty of solutions available to bring the car close to our houses, but not literally bring those and bang into our front walls.
I'm sorry to cut you off or both here, but I think we have about 5 minutes left. And if I may use these 5 minutes to, I think, because some of the questions that were posted, you have already answered. But if I'll ask you within the last 5 minutes to say a concluding statement, but also answer this final question from Amr in the Netherlands, with the view of keeping our built heritage to many generations to come. What do you think of the two options that he is going to propose now between these two visions? So one is to create digital twins of heritage sites for visitors to enjoy virtually, and at the same time keeping real site experiences limited because of the consequences involved due to the vulnerability of such sites. So, offering access through virtual access and minimizing or limiting physical access because of the vulnerability. So if you can maybe address this this kind of question, and then if you can give your final statement, please, both of you. Thank you.
Yeah, but
Okay, so if you want me to address the digital twin, I think I'm the last person who should do that. I'm from a different generation. No, but I really actually heritage digitalization is one of the key research areas of the chair. But Amra, I think my issue would be that if or the topic of our discussion. I mean, creating digital twins, I think is a trend, is something that we cannot avoid. It's a Gen Z trend. It's happening in gamification. It's happening on many on many settings, and it is very much enjoyable. Whether this would actually limit the visitors to the actual site, I doubt it, because we have done some research on that, and actually, creating digital twins encourages people to go and visit the site one more time and to see it for real. So I feel as if they are totally two different experiences. I think they are both should be encouraged and should be managed. It's not, and maybe here I also tend to maybe comment on the concept of carrying capacity that was brought earlier by Soumyen, that it does not need 100 people to destroy a heritage site. I mean, a heritage site could be destroyed by one person walking, with some graffiti or picking up. So the idea is that heritage management and visitors management and creating what is known in planning as honeypots that maybe alleviate the pressure from, people want to be in the heritage site for some time, but then they really like their comfort, their usual comfort. So creating honeypots out of the heart of the heritage site. So I feel as if we really need to focus on how do we manage such sites. And what are these sites? I mean, there is a big difference between a settlement that we want to bring the local community back to it, and maybe a fort that has got a limited visitor flow, and that this flow goes in a particular direction. So I think we should do both. I think we should still make our settlements enjoyable, and we should look at heritage economics, because these visitors are the source of revitalizing certain economy within the heritage site. So that the communities should still be able to enjoy that within a management framework. At the moment, it's just like left in many places. It's just like people just come and do whatever. So yes, let's do more digital twins and have more Gen Z actually interested in such sites. And but I can assure you, based on a research paper that have been published recently, that this does not limit the visitors, but encourage it. And we want it to be encouraged so that we can, but we just need to manage it. That's, I think, I would close on that note.
If I can just give you one example that just north of Calcutta, we did there was this 19th century house, which is a garden house, which we did a virtual gallery, a virtual museum for it. Now, the reason why I think that is, and I'm just coming to that answer, that why we did it is because we realized that there were many aspects of that, the heritage of that 19th century house were intangible and were, impossible or difficult or incredibly um, expensive to bring to the as an experience to bring to the real building. So because this particular building was associated with the memory of a very famous Indian painter, two Indian painters, but also the whole series of sort of social changes that were taking place in the 19th century post the gradual British acquisition of that part of the world. Now, those things, if you were to create a gallery and an experience, would cost millions. And it might not be successful as well. Whereas what this could do is that it could talk about the social history, it could talk about the garden's changes, it could talk about the artistic traditions that were associated with it, and it could talk about thematically Indian art, in the late century, early 20th century. Those things would have not been possible if we had not done the digital version. Now, I think, therefore, that it's not a question of either or, it's a question of really complementing an experience, a physical experience, with a whole series of the digital experiences. They can be multi-layered. And also, let's not forget the AI at this moment as it is emerging, because there are quite a lot of interesting possibilities. One connected to Oman that we are trying to do now is that how do we answer and address some of the common questions that everyday person may have about the culture and our history. It is not about experts at giving advice, but just a general awareness. And I think those things can be well created by the use of digital means, digital access and digital means, which otherwise may not be possible. So I would certainly think about the complementarity of it. I will also, aside from all the kind of issues that Professor Haber has obviously pointed out in terms of the kind of threats to historic sites. So there are opportunities there. As to whether we are just replicating it is my worry. We should not be replicating, but we should be complementing and enhancing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. But I
Thank
think
you very much.
yeah.
Thank you very much, Professor Hiba and Professor Soumyen, for an engaging discussion. We have so many other questions already posted on the chat, but because of the time, unfortunately, I have to cut it short. But we will make notes of these questions, and hopefully we will do some kind of summary of discussion here, and then post it for the benefit of disseminating knowledge that has been well shared here. Again, if I may repeat, for those who are interested in receiving a certificate of attendance, Risa have already posted the address, the email address in the chat. It's unesco.chair@gutech.edu.um. Again, unesco.chair@gutech.edu.um. So please send your name as you would like it to appear on the certificate. And if you would like to have your organization or affiliation also shown, make sure you send it in there. Please stay tuned to our website and our social media accounts. We keep posting events, capacity building, and those who are actually work closely with the youth. We have already announced a competition, the Arab Youth or Youth Arab Region. It's a competition in videography and photography about heritage in the neighborhood, أثر في الجوار. Please check our website, social media, encourage younger generation to actually participate in the competition. The submission is July, end of July, and then we will also be providing training for those who participate. So those who register to participate in the competition, we would actually provide them with some training in order to help them compose either the picture or the video and participate. So it's a combination of boarding as well as capacity. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and we look forward to seeing you again. Have a lovely evening. Thank you.